guys, today's Tub Time is super special because we have our very first guest on Tub Time. His name is Dai Manuel. He is a lifestyle, health, and business mentor and coach. He's also an author and a TEDx speaker, and I'm really excited to see what kind of valuable information he can give to us. We'll primarily be focusing on work-life balance because I feel like this is something that a lot of us are going through right now, just really trying to find a good balance between work life and home life and getting our rest, getting our downtime in between. So without further ado, let's get started.
Recording in progress.
All right. Hi, Dai. How are you?
Great, great, great. And do I say is it Sama?
Sima.
Sima. I wanted it because it's like
just like your name.
That's what I thought it was. Okay, this is so cool. Well,
that's why I was so excited. I was like, wow, my first podcast guest, and he literally has like a variation of my name. I was like, can't get any better than that, honestly.
Well, thank you. And I just got to say, it's I just love the theme of your podcast and just the whole premise of it. I had to ask you, like, what was the inspiration? Like, what got you started? Because I imagine there's got to be a great story to this.
So it actually started like a couple years ago. My friend and I, we both came up with the idea when she was living in the same state as me at the time before she like moved away. So that was like a couple summers ago. We did one episode and then I took like a random hiatus for like 2 years because I was like, well, it's a great idea, but at the same time, like, I don't really know what direction I want to go with this, and I don't really want to jump into anything without, you know, having a good plan set in place, which can be kind of self-inhibiting and kind of a hindrance to productivity. But at the same time, I'm also glad that I started now because I just feel like I'm in, like, you know, a better place to do those types of things, especially with Podmatch, and that kind of just presented itself to me. So I was like, okay, now the timing's right. Now I feel like I can really get started with this. And you actually came up like pretty early. We're on episode 4 right now. So
woo!
So far, so good.
I love it. I feel like I'm overdressed right now. I'm like,
you're fine. I'm literally just surrounded by bubbles.
In a tub.
So,
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's not.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, you're good, you're good. So before we get started, I do want to ask. Okay, so you're in Vancouver, right?
Okay,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it's about like 11 a.m. over there, right? It's like 2 p.m. here.
Yeah,
right now.
That's right.
Okay, yeah. So
you're what part of the United States are you again?
I'm in New Jersey, so
New Jersey. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, what's your morning routine like? What's your like day-to-day life like? I already kind of gave an overview to the audience. I mentioned that you're a lifestyle coach, health coach, business mentor. You do a lot of things. You're an author, TEDx speaker, really cool stuff. But first, I want to get into kind of like who you are, what you like to do, just like what's a day in the life of Dai like.
All right, cool. I think you'll be, well, I was going to say it's not as interesting as probably it could be, but it's all good. It's my mornings, you know, and, but we'll get into that. Like, so yeah, I'm totally in. Like, I'm just excited to have a great conversation with you. You know? So you ask whatever you want, but, you know, I'd like it to be conversational if you're cool with that too.
Yeah, no problem. So I don't know, do you have like a morning routine? Like, what do you usually do?
Oh, yeah. Do you want me to tell you right now? Oh, sorry. Are we starting?
I don't know. We're just letting the conversation flow. It's all good. It's a very chill podcast.
Oh, I love
That's
it.
what Tub Time is all about. Like,
I love it. Okay, well, thank you. I wasn't sure if this is sort of the preemptive conversation before we actually start. So, well, let me tell you, you know, morning routines. I used to be. And I think this is important to note because I think a lot of us get into those places where we do feel that we need to make some changes, you know, especially when it comes to our health, our well-being, especially mental health. I mean, that conversation's alive and real for all of us nowadays, especially after the pandemic. I mean, I think all of us, no one came out of the pandemic unscathed, right? Exactly. Like we all got hit.
We all came out feeling like we just rose out of our coffins. Seeing daylight for the first time.
Well, and even beyond that, it's just like we almost forget how to interact with people, like in real life, and so we feel like that period in our life we feel like we need to reconnect with ourselves. And I think that's where morning routines, or I always like to refer to it more as a morning ritual, because when it gets to ritual, we don't really think about it. We just do it. You know, it's just part of who we are. And I know early on when you get started, where at least this is how I've experienced it, was, you know, I would try to make a checklist of all the things I'm going to do every morning. And I mean, it's nice because it gives us clarity. It definitely makes us feel confident that we know what we're to be doing.
Yeah.
But I found it to be exhausting, you know, like, and also it's my perfectionist part of my brain would then start to critique and self-judge anytime I missed any of the things on the list.
Yeah.
And I realized, you know, being so prescriptive with it actually doesn't match how I live my life. My life isn't a prescription. It's not, I do this, then I do this, then I do this. Oh, and then I'm going to do this. And, you know, like, that's just, I don't know about your life. My life's never run like that.
Yeah.
No. So why are we so focused on trying to create these routines that fit that kind of mold? Like, and then we wonder and we beat ourselves up. Like, why do I just keep failing at this stuff? Why can't I just keep doing it? Exactly. And so I realized, I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm being too hard. Maybe I'm being way too prescriptive and way too hard on myself. And I started to say, well, what if every morning when I wake up, I just check in with myself and say, sheesh, there's lots of things I could do. What do I feel like I really need right now?
Right.
And so I started waking in the morning, asking myself that exact question. And rather than going through and trying to do a list of like 8 different things before anybody gets out of bed, before, you know, after me, I'm now looking at my list and I'm like, you know what? I feel like I could use a walk this morning, maybe a little stretch, maybe a smoothie. That's what I'm going to do this morning. And then maybe tomorrow morning, I might wake up and say, you know what? I feel like I need some meditation. I need some introspection, or I feel like journaling today.
Right.
My point is I am doing something every morning, part of that routine, but it's not always the same every morning, you know? I don't know. How does it work for you? How does it work for you?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, like, there were times in my life where I felt like, okay, I have to wake up at 6 in the morning. I have to work out for an hour. I have to do some homework. I have to do this. I have to do that. But that became just so monotone for me. And when I get into that kind of headspace where I'm like, okay, this is getting way too repetitive, then I start to overthink about what I'm doing, just because I guess in my head I want to spice things up, but at the same time I don't want to compromise, you know, that routine that we're so accustomed to adhere to. But then I just realized, you know what, like, humans aren't robots. We're meant to just live our lives too. Life isn't just about work. Life isn't just about, you know, doing one specific thing. And I totally get the perfectionism part. Trust me, I am a victim to it as well. And I think I think that, like, that's the correct word for it. Like, we can become our own victims. We can become our own enemies just by getting in our own heads. So I really like what you said about just kind of going with the flow, just feeling what your body has to say, feeling what your mind has to say, and just honoring that. It's really just kind of about honoring yourself every single day and just going along with that. So I really like that. And I'm sure that, I don't know, I really am trying to implement that more as I go. Some days aren't really that great, some mornings aren't really that great, but we can always look to another day. We can always amend that. So that's the beauty of life, I feel.
You know, I love what you said, you know, and I think I can hear also in your voice there's that self-compassion, right? Because I think that's important, that ability to not only empathize with ourselves, but be compassionate to ourselves, that it's okay. You know, it's okay if, you know, I've had mornings where I'm like, I don't want to do anything this morning. You know, like I just feel like I just need a nothing morning, and I'll do that and I'll feel great for it, you know, because I don't.
It's so great. Like, sometimes I literally just don't want to do a thing. I just want to sleep, okay? Like, sleep is honestly so underrated, I feel. Like, there are so many people who just kind of want to correct themselves more than they want to, you know, like, heal themselves. Because I feel like in a world where, you know, like, stuff like, I mean, I know people my age who are getting, like, tear trap fillers because they're waking up with, like, dark circles under their eyes, they're not getting enough sleep and stuff like that. So they'll try to put, like, a bandage on it instead of, you know, just looking at your lifestyle, looking at what you're doing to your own body, you don't have to damage yourself and keep putting a bandage on it if you really get to the root of the issue. And coming from a family of doctors, I mean, it kind of made sense to me growing up, but it doesn't make sense to a lot of people until like they really hit rock bottom.
And then sometimes we're in rock bottom, but sometimes we actually put the rock over us, right? So it's like, I'm not even on the bottom. I picked it up and I put it on myself, you know, like I'm definitely not getting out of this, you know, and it's like
Patrick Star from SpongeBob's like little house.
Totally, yes.
Yeah.
I was say, that's really fitting for also being in a tub right now, you know, like I'm just thinking that the SpongeBob reference fits really well. But I was going to say, you brought up a really good point just about, well, just sort of that self-check-in, but more importantly, there was one thing that I found worked really well for me when I started implementing this almost a decade ago, actually. I started monitoring something called heart rate variability. Mm-hmm. And so HRV is this interesting aspect that we all live with. And I mean, it's just it's something that we can monitor in all of us. And it's this variance that we have in our heartbeats based on levels of stress, levels of recovery or lack thereof. Okay. So our HRV reading, when we take it, if it's chronically low, meaning that you have a low score in your HRV rating, it's usually a sign that you're under recovered, under rested, maybe overly stressed, but usually your body might be experiencing a lot more of that fight and flight and not coming out of that. And we all know that chronic stress, it is like the number one killer right now in our century. Like that is the challenge that
literally causes cancer. It's crazy.
Yes, it's crazy, right? Like, and especially because it's something that we can manage.
Yeah,
we can manage. We can do something about it. But HRV, I find, is the best way to tap in to know exactly where we are from the central nervous system. But also, are we chronically in a fight and flight, or are we actually getting recovery? Are we having the time to have the downtime to really just allow things to repair and rejuvenate? And the problem is most of us aren't. Most of us are stuck in fight and flight. This also creates an increase in cortisol levels because we don't regulate cortisol well. Back to your sleep conversation. Yes, sleep is underrated. If we have better quality sleep, we actually regulate our hormones more effectively. Metabolism improves, you know, hair, skin, nails, body's growth. Like everything gets better when you get more sleep. Like, and yet we're challenged to get it. And this HRV rating, if you start to monitor that and make adjustments based on where it's at, you'll start to see things improve almost overnight. It's really quite remarkable. And most people, most activity trackers now have it already built in. Like my Apple Watch, it does it. And I monitor it every day. And the neat thing is, and this is something I'd like to make note of, if people don't believe me on this, test it yourself. And if you are in a heightened state of stress, say you just experienced something like really, you know, very dramatic and maybe very stressful, monitor your HRV right then and there. You'll probably see that, oh boy, it's low. And that's usually a sign that you're in a state of stress. Wow. But here's something that's really cool. Create some space for yourself. Go meditate for 5 to 10 minutes, really working on slow, controlled breathing.
Yeah, I really believe in meditation.
But then retest and you'll notice that your HRV improves.
Yeah.
Like you'll see, not only are you starting feeling better, but it's better. It's getting better. You know, it's really good. So,
yeah.
Now, do you think that this really speaks to the kind of culture that we live in? Being in America, we really rely on this like individualistic type of culture where everything has to be like fast, efficient. And if you're not efficient, then you're seen as weak. Like, how do you think that we can kind of ameliorate that and kind of like blend in these healthy practices with a very unhealthy cultural message that's constantly being ingrained in us day to day?
Well, I think you almost answered it with the question itself. From the standpoint, I think we're aware of the influences outside of ourselves.
Right.
And being able to filter through a lot of that noise, it's very important, you know, so this mindfulness, this awareness of ourselves and our involvement in our own world, our own culture, and what is feeding us right now, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, even physically, you know, like what are those inputs that we're allowing in?
Yeah.
And if you start to really analyze that, I mean, let's be honest, like you go on to say Instagram and depending on the nature of the types of people that you follow, you might see a lot of very well staged, you know, very well curated content.
Yeah.
That makes everything look awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't help but feel if we're not in an awesome place for ourselves, emotionally, physically, spiritually, you know, like that affects us negatively. We all of a sudden we're like, I want that. Why not me? I'm not good enough. Like, oh, it's crazy. Like it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And so I think self-awareness is important, but also creating boundaries or limits around how much we allow in to influence us.
Right.
You know?
I believe that fully. I think that everything that we consume is everything that's influencing us, whether or not people choose to accept that or believe that. A lot of people think, oh, I can do whatever I want. Nothing's gonna affect me. That's not true. Even down to like the music you listen to, down to like your everyday, just the little minutia of everyday things, like that all has a very rippling impact. And I think that's something that comes with like understanding practices like meditation, like when you really have time to like quiet yourself down for 10 minutes, do some breathing, which is good for your brain. Everyone needs oxygen. I can't even tell you how many people I meet, they're just like so out of breath for some reason, you know, like even people who are like, yeah, very shallow breathing. I'm like, take a breath, like it's fine, like you can breathe, like, but I feel like maybe, I don't know, maybe there's like an epidemic of like anxiety since COVID has happened, or I don't know what it is, but I've definitely been more inclined to study, you know, like meditative practices. And there was actually a while where I was like, you know what, I really want to visit China. I really want to visit like Shaolin temples for, yeah, I don't know. I definitely have like a little travel list going, but I think that it's important, like especially coming from like an Eastern background. Like my parents are Pakistani, like spirituality is something that's very huge in our family, and just implementing these practices is something that I've seen like some people in the West do, but I do want to see like more of it, just because like I can't do it anymore. Like I cannot deal with like the constant like rush of everything, people's anxieties, because everyone takes on each other's like emotions too, which is something that I've seen. So being able to kind of like independently kind of assess where you are and be in the moment is something that I feel like a lot of people just should focus on more, instead of what's this person doing, what's that person doing, how can I be like this person.
Yes.
Don't try to fabricate anything, because it's just gonna come off forced. Like when you fabricate something, it's essentially forcing yourself into another type of mold, and we don't want that. Life's supposed to be nice and bubbly.
I was gonna say, it was really well said, you know, and I think there's some really poignant points there that are worth addressing. But I think, at least I feel that we often actually know what we need. We do instinctively. I think we often know what it is that we need in the moment, but we're not always very attentive to our own needs. You know what I mean? Like we're very quick to seek gratification from other things outside of ourselves, you know, and looking for that external validation so we can feel like, am I enough? You know, and there's this constant battle, this ebb and flow with this idea around value and how we show up and how we're perceived. And it is exhausting. I like this, explore meditative practices more deeply. And I had the same sort of epiphany, you know, a number of years ago. While my family and I, we lived, before we came back to Vancouver, during, you know, before the pandemic, we actually moved to Vancouver right before, like, and it wasn't the pandemic that instigated our move. It was because my kids wanted to finish high school in Vancouver. But we lived in Bali, Indonesia for 2.5 years. And it was amazing. But while we were living there, I kept having these interactions with people that had experienced something called the Vipassana. Vipassana is a silent meditation style that's often equated or referenced when people mention Buddha, and sort of that process that he went through in discovering nirvana, you know, like was this meditation practice he did under a tree, and then he was enlightened, right? And became the Buddha from Siddhartha. And anyway, long and short of it is, the way that you practice this meditation is you go to a meditation center, and you're there for like 11 days, 10 of which is spent in complete silence. And they guide you and they teach you this meditative practice. And there's no electronics allowed, no writing utensils. Like literally, you're living like a monk for about 10 days, a week and a half. And you're spending from, we'd get up at 6 a.m., you know, to be in the meditation hall. And then we'd be in there till practically 9 p.m. at night.
Wow.
Like it was one of the most intense yet enlightening, pardon the pun, experiences I've ever had. You know, like I'm really challenged to sit anywhere for that length of time. I mean, let alone 10 minutes, but you know, to talk about 10 hours in a meditation, I forget it. But I learned so much, and I experienced such clarity and openness and just a connectiveness, you know, that oneness that we often refer to, of this feeling connected to not everything just around you, but everything in your own life. And it was just a beautiful experience. But the neat thing is, it's nonprofit. All these places run by volunteers. There's no money exchanged.
Yeah.
Anybody.org, they have centers all around the world that you can go to. And it's just a matter of creating the space for yourself to go experience it. So I just thought, and when you said that, I thought, I got to tell you about this, because I think that might be the thing that's calling you right now.
I really like that. I mean,
anyways,
as I fall into the tub,
I really like, and the thing that I really like about meditation, the beauty of it is that, well, especially with Buddhism, because with Buddhism, the message that they really try to hone is detachment, right? Detachment from worldly issues, detachment from, you know, like the everyday concerns that we have in life, and just finding peace within yourself. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people in the West try to achieve, right? Through yoga classes, meditation classes. But I feel like a lot of people may need that extra help or assistance to try and not get into their own head, not get into their own thoughts. So what advice do you have for people who are, you know, anxiety prone or prone to just being stuck in their mind, people who literally cannot sit in a room for 10 minutes without going crazy, you know? What advice do you have for them to quiet those intrusive thoughts and just to find a space of quietude?
Wow. Well, that's a great question. And I wish there was just one answer I could give you that would be the answer.
right.
You know, the monkey mind is a challenging one, because we all deal with it at different degrees. Like, no one's immune to this. It's just a part of our psychology. It's how our brains function. I mean, we are extremely creative species. You know, humanity is amazing that way. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, you know, and we have this natural resiliency, you know. I mean, think about it. We got 8 billion of us across this planet practically, and we've dominated some of the most harsh living environments on this planet, and yet we're still there thriving. Yeah. There's something to that. We're good at navigating suffering. We're also good at navigating hard stuff, and yet still being able to thrive in those situations. That's in all of us. It's in our DNA.
Wow.
So acknowledging that, owning that about ourselves, gives us this sense of hope, for sure. You know, that no matter how stressful and how much anxiety we might be feeling, or overwhelming with our lives, or as I say, the struggle with the juggle, that is life. It's important to take time for ourselves, some space for ourselves.
Wow.
And it's okay to not have a plan. Like, you know, we are, the North American culture specifically, we're so focused on, I need a purpose, I need a why, I need direction, I need meaning, I need. And it's like, you know, life is good. And sometimes we just got to get out of our own way. And as someone that's dealt with social anxiety my entire life, I can honestly say that those little breaks that I take,
these are beneficial periods of time that I can give myself. If I go for a walk for an hour, 45 minutes.
I might go for a cycle, a bike ride along, more of a leisurely ride, something that's more meditative, because I come out of them feeling clear, feeling more calm, more connected. And those in itself is the reward for creating space for myself. So it's one of those things that becomes almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once you start doing it and you start to practice it regularly, it actually becomes easier and easier to get back to that place of calm.
Mm-hmm.
But we got to practice and we got to start somewhere, you know? Okay. So my invitation to everybody is just start doing something, you know, and whatever it is for you, just start, you know?
Literally run a bath.
Exactly. Yes.
Like anything, really. I agree. Yeah.
I complicate things, you know. I know for myself, especially, like there's been periods of my life where I've just overcomplicated stuff. You know, I've tried to make, as they often say, the molehill out of an anthill, right? Like I just make a big deal out of something that, quite frankly, didn't need that amount of attention from me.
And then you look back on it and you're just like, why was I even
anxiety
concerned about that in the first place? It just seems,
like a lot of problems that we think we have, like honestly seem like just little droplets in like one big ocean of, you know.
Yes. And back to your point too about this idea of getting back to being centered or present for right now, you know, the present for the present, you know, like it's, that is what we're all trying to exercise more, or bring ourselves back to that ability to be fully aware and present for our own life right now.
Right.
But you're right. We're constantly torn between ideas of where we're going and where we'd like to go and what might happen tomorrow or a week later, a month later, a year later, you know, like whatever. Like, but we also focus a lot on the stuff that we've already done that we can't change.
Yeah.
And there's this constant, and it's exhausting going back and forth, where really a lot of anything and everything that ever happens to us in our lives happens right now in the present, you know? So getting back to that's another aspect of meditation. It helps us sort of quiet those distractions that tend to pull our attention in either of those places to get us centered and back to now.
Right.
And because once we start being more present in our own life, we're more aware, we're more connected. We often feel more fulfilled as well.
I agree. And I feel like a subculture within American culture right now, it's really big. You know, cancel culture, we've heard about that from I don't even know when that started, but we've been hearing about it for like some time now. And a really big problem that I have with it is that people will take things from like 10, 15 years ago, or even like 3 months ago, and then just decide to shove it in someone's face. And they'll kind of just be like, hey, remember when this happened? This kind of defines you as a person for the rest of your life. And what I really want to kind of present to my audience is that by implementing, you know, like healthier practices, people can kind of change themselves and really fixate on being good, I guess, if they really want to. But continuing to like throw things in people's faces is just, it's definitely changed culture to be way more arrogant and way more self-righteous. So how do we kind of break that down? How do we kind of cancel culture so that when we're trying to better ourselves, we're not hindered by, you know, outside influences just charging at you and just being like, hey, remember this?
It's a tough place to be, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are feeling the pressure to filter ourselves quite a bit because we're always worried that, oh, this might offend somebody. And if I offend somebody, I might get canceled, you know? And so we're all in this place of trying to play super safe. And, you know, a lot of growth doesn't happen in that place. Now, I'm not saying to go out and be offensive and to offend people and get defensive on certain views. But asking oneself, what's my motivation for this? Like, really, what is the motivating factor for people to go out and create this wave of canceling or locking in on an individual and then really setting out to ruin that person's life? You know, like, I mean, that's what is happening, you know? And, I mean, Netflix just released a new documentary about and it's called The Most Hated Man on the Internet, you know? And it's like, and it talks all about a little bit of this culture, but also this idea of revenge porn and how it came to be. And this idea of people publicly shaming others,
right?
Leveraging the internet to do that. And one thing I like to invite people is like, if you were on the flip side of that and the one being attacked, how would you feel?
Right.
You know, like what would it do to your life, to your family, to your friends, your communities, your
psyche,
employment,
how
everything?
You view the world.
Yeah. Like, but now flip it and you want to be the one now doing that to somebody else. Why? I just want to know why.
Exactly.
Why do you feel if you put those two people in a room together, that's not going to happen? They're going to have dialogue. They're going to have a conversation. They're going to try to come to some sort of mutual understanding. And the person that's being approached saying, hey, you know, you did this. I mean, I don't know if that was right. Can we have a conversation about that? Like, how do you feel about that? Like, you know what I mean? Be adults.
Exactly.
People hide behind the internet, man. They hide. And I always ask people, would you have that conversation with them face to face? If you tell me yes, then hey, fair enough. Right. But man, I feel for a lot of people and I feel for like, especially my kids, they're 17 and 19 now, my daughters. And I'm like, geesh, you know, I'm afraid for them.
Exactly. Gen Z, they definitely have a lot on their plate because, I mean, from what I've seen, just scrolling through TikTok and looking at comments, like just to see, I've just been seeing like so many people just be very hyper judgmental and just fixating on the wrong things that don't necessarily correlate to who the person is, but more so just correlates to the projection of who they think that person is. And that's something that I feel like is honestly a form of extremism in a way, just because it's like you're taking just this one little minute detail and you're forming your own narrative around it, and you're just letting that exacerbate and spread like a virus in its own sense. So and us going through a pandemic, like obviously we're all trying to protect ourselves. We're in kind of like a self-defense kind of mode already. So kind of instigating like these other like social viruses in a sense is definitely very telling of where we are in our culture right now. And I really just hope that we don't kind of recede, even though I feel like that might be a trend at the moment. Kind of, yeah, so it's definitely tricky, and I'm really glad that we're having this conversation to kind of set these little building blocks down so that people can remember, hey, it's good to take a step back from social media. It's good to take a step back from, you know, what other people are saying, because are these people relevant in your life? No. The only person who should matter in your own head is you and your family and people who truly love and support you, people who know you. I feel I've been seeing a lot of people saying, you know, I just judge by what's apparent. And that's something that really stuck with me, because I feel like when people say things like that, they're judging things by what they see and not by what they know. And I feel like that's just something that can really just go... It just goes remiss, and it's something that we really need to talk about more, because it's never okay to just, you know, judge a book by its cover. We learn that all the time, but nowadays I feel like the discourse is definitely changing directions, and it's not really in a good direction at the moment.
But I think you said something really well there. You know, I know it's cliche, this whole idea of not judging a book by its cover. Like, we all understand what that means. We do. Right. We understand what that, you know, call it an analogy or whatever you want, a metaphor. There's a lot of truth to that. But if we think about what it's actually saying, what it's saying is, in a book, there's so much tremendous knowledge and wisdom contained within those pages, right, those chapters, those stories. But if we were only to judge what the story is and come to some sort of conclusion just by looking at the cover. I mean, you come from a family of doctors. Could you imagine if they got their degree by looking at the covers of the textbooks?
I'd be worried.
I'd be worried too. Yeah, I would. I'd be very worried. Like, but that is ultimately what we're doing when we're judging someone based on the surface. We're saying that everything that's within you doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This is how I'm judging you, is based on this.
Right.
That is so empty and shallow. And in fact, I often would push back on those individuals that have that tendency and say, like, are you hurting? Are you okay? What's going on with you? Because, you know, as much as they're finding the outlet to express their own internal, you know, strife that they're working through, but they're externalizing that energy on somebody else. Right. They're nitpicking somebody else. They're judging somebody else because they're stuck in a cycle of probably constantly self-judging and self-ridiculing themselves. And I feel for that pain. You know, I tend to attract a number of people like that know my story, because I've been there. Right. I have dealt with that. And I think we all deal with it to some level, but we can all change too, you know, we can.
Yeah. Not everyone has to be, you know, just toxic for the rest of their lives. I mean, like, everyone has a different dynamic depending on whom they're speaking to, depending on, you know, just so many different things. And I feel like we really have missed the fact that humans really are very complex beings. As much as we try to simplify ourselves with labels, with stereotypes, etc., it just, at the end of the day, like, when you really distill us, like, we are just all pretty much like wired the same, more or less. I mean, I can't say, you know, like, one size fits all for like everyone, but definitely, like, generally, like, if you're kind to someone, they'll be kind to you. If you try to understand someone, most of the time they'll try to understand you. No one owes you anything. That's certainly something that I've seen, like, oh, I don't owe you this, I don't owe you that. But I feel like at the end of the day, we do owe each other, at the very least, some time to just sit back and listen. Even if you don't want to say anything to the person, even if you don't even want to see their face, I feel like at least listening to their story is something that can be just so empowering in and of itself. Just shutting up, listening, and then just making your decision after. You can judge that person however much you want, but also keep that judgment to yourself. You don't have to like go out and be harsh with people and expect that to not come back on you, you know? It's like people have felt this like invincibility, I guess, when talking with other people. They just come from a very, you know, high, arrogant kind of standpoint. And this actually reminds me of a Tolstoy quote that I read. I believe it's like, arrogance is when you think that you're already perfect because you don't believe that you can become a better person or something like that. It's something along those lines. So things like that just really stick with me, and I don't know, but it's just so hard to spread that message. Like if I'm not on tub time, I could definitely not like tweet this, you know what I mean? It'd just be...
Well,
right?
it'd be challenging, right? Because it's also, some people aren't ready to receive or to actually be honest with themselves. Like, listen, I was in denial for a lot of my life, a good chunk from sort of my late teens into my early 30s. I was managing my stress, my overwhelm, my anxiety, but within healthy ways. You know, for me, it was alcohol. And occasionally some narcotic use, you know, like that was what I would do. But meanwhile, I'm in the fitness and health industry. And so you can imagine how I felt, the imposter syndrome, the self-ridicule and criticism, it was there, like big time. And that affected my mental health a lot. But I got to a place where, you know, all of a sudden I was literally on the verge of losing everything. And I made a commitment to myself to finally try to deal with the challenges that I've been working through internally rather than avoid them.
Right.
Because that's all alcohol was. Alcohol was a way to avoid things.
Exactly.
Push them off.
Save it for later. It's a way to like medicate internally, I feel like. Even though you were trying to take care of your health at the same time, like I feel like when you initially, well, when people initially view health, they're like, oh, it's something physical, it's just for my body, whatever. It also has a very great effect on your mental health if you allow it to, and if you really push yourself into that state. So I mean, I'm really glad that you kind of found that turning point in your life. And
it wasn't easy though, but it was worth it.
Of course.
And I like to let people know.
It's never going to be easy.
And it just started, it was a 1-year commitment. I said, I'm going to go 1 year without drinking, just 1 year. And you know, that would have been the longest stint ever from the time I was 17 to like 32, like 15 years. That would be the longest break from alcohol ever. But I did it. And during that process, the first 3 to 4 months were really, really challenging.
Of course.
But then all of a sudden I got to a place because I got help as well. I realized I needed someone with specialized support. Found a psychologist, worked with him for 3 months, found a relationships counselor, worked with her for 4 months. And that, along with all my own inner work, it made all the difference. Now I'm far from getting to where I want to be, but I'm on the path. Yeah. And that all started, you know, 12 years ago. And I'll be on this path the rest of my life, you know, but it's a choice to go every day and to follow those certain actions. And that's all I can invite anybody out there to do is, you know, as you become more and more clear and you remove the distractions that are negatively influencing you, you create the space to actually say, hey, this is my life. Yeah. I am the engineer and the architect for this life. What do I want to create? Exactly. You know, and then just start from there. Just start there. And you know what? There's no limits other than the limits you put on yourself, you know, like just have fun in dreaming and visioning and just living life, you know? And anyways, I know we could talk all day long about this.
Speaking of limits, we do have a time limit. We have like less than a minute left. So if you want to take these last few seconds to plug anything, like Instagram, Twitter, anything, I can also write it in and edit.
Nothing to plug other than just connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. I'm most active on those 3. Just my name, Dai Manuel. You'll find me. Shoot me a note. Say, hey, I heard you on Tub Time. This is what I do. This is what I do for self-care. That's a great place for us to start a conversation. And if you're interested in this, my website's got about 1,800 articles to help you be the best version, but also live your best life. And
all right, guys, that was that. I really hope that you enjoyed this week's Tub Time. Please like this video, click that notification bell, subscribe, leave a comment, all that. Check out Dai Manuel's social media pages, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.